training for a little over 2 years now, but I have overall around 20 years of industry experience, primarily on the DevOps area. Although DevOps is a new term, but I started working on similar technologies in '96, so it's about 20 years. On the DevOps, so I'm going to share what all I'm going to cover, but primarily my focus will be more on learning DevOps tools, technologies, and how do we move more into DevOps mindset as well as into automation. With the current structure or with the current mindset, the way it is working is you need to have understanding about how the development is happening, understanding about how the testing can be done, understand how you can have the scalable infrastructure and all that. So as I said, my focus will be more on automation, learning tools, technologies, and I'm going to have all of this covered on Linux platform. So that is going to be my question to all of you, whether you have any prior knowledge or experience working on Linux. So that was my introduction. Why don't we get started with Anil. Anil, can you go ahead and introduce yourself, please?
Yeah. Myself, Anil, I have around 8 years of experience. Initially 5 years I am involved in the development, then I have moved to the configuration manager. And currently I am working with the Windows technologies, Microsoft technologies. I have a little bit idea about the Linux, like commands and all and these things. Currently I am working in NIT technology in Noida.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks, Anil, and welcome.
Yeah.
Okay. Next, Prashant.
Yeah, I am this Prashant. I completed my graduation in Silicon Valley University. That's it. I'm very pressure to this technology.
Okay. Okay, thanks, Prashant, and welcome.
Thank you.
Venu.
Hi Sanjay, this is Venu. I have completed my masters in computer science, Silicon Valley University, and I did not have any experience.
Okay. Okay. Any exposure to Linux, Venu?
Yeah.
Now, do you have any exposure to Linux? Working on Linux?
No.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So I'm going to cover a little bit of on Linux as well, but let me share my screen and talk about what all I'm going to cover in the training program. Let me know once all of you can see my screen. Can you all see it?
Yeah.
Yes. No. Okay. Thank you. And by the way, this session is going to be a lot interactive, so I would recommend and request all of you to make it really interactive. This is definitely not a typical classroom session. It's going to be, as I said, a lot of interaction. Okay, so I will be focusing a lot on DevOps and what kind of roles and responsibilities we play, and why DevOps has become such an important function within the organization. So we'll have a lot of focus on that and understanding that part. Second one, how DevOps can provide a solution to any problem that you face if you do not have DevOps mindset. And first of all, in fact, what kind of problems that you face if you do not have DevOps within the organization, right? So we'll talk about that. Then the third bullet point I have mentioned, transitioning into DevOps mindset. It is more into mindset. So a lot of people think that DevOps is, tools, technologies. Actually, that's not the case. Beyond tools and technologies, DevOps is a big mindset shift. And that is what we are going to talk about. That, how do we enable the mindset shift? Also, we'll talk about, what kind of skills and technologies are required. So we'll have a lot of focus on. So, and I'll just pause for say 30 seconds. Let me know if you have any questions on this. Okay, so assuming no questions, the next slide is, we'll start with AWS. So I'm not sure how many of you have exposure to AWS, but AWS is the cloud. You might have heard about cloud computing.
Yeah.
But AWS provides you the infrastructure in the cloud. So
Right.
AWS stands for Amazon Web Service. All of, so we'll start with, understanding what is AWS, what kind of infrastructure or services they provide. And then we'll also in fact, all of us will have our own Linux host in AWS. So your individual Linux host. And this is, by the way, a free account that AWS provides. Then we'll talk about some of the services provided by AWS. Elastic IP is being one of them. But there are many other services provided by AWS. So we'll briefly touch upon that one. Then the Linux system that you're going to have in AWS, we will have some of the things practiced on that one. So like basics of Linux, like I understand many of you are not from, or most of you are not from Linux background. So we'll spend some time on that for you to understand at least Linux, because as I said, all the tools and technologies that we are going to learn, it's going to be on Linux. So that becomes the fundamental of what we are going to learn. Then we'll start with installation of DNS and Apache. So DNS gives you an ability to translate the domain name into the IP address. So it's more like mapping that is done on the DNS side. But this is again the fundamental of internet to work actually. Without DNS, you cannot imagine internet to work. So for example, if you have to remember the IP address of say google.com, facebook.com, it's extremely difficult for us, right? We cannot. So, but for two computers to communicate, they need to communicate through the IP address. So they know each other by the IP address. That's their identity. Now, for two computers to communicate, they need the IP address, or they need to know the IP address. But for us, we need to remember domain names because we cannot remember IP addresses. So there has to be someone in between who can take the input from us as a domain name and translate that into the IP address, and that is what DNS is used for. So we'll have our own DNS install. We'll see how actually it works in practical situation and things like that. Moving on to Apache, which is the web server. So web server, we will have our own web server. We'll configure some of our domain names there, and we'll see actually how actually in real situation it works. So more like simulation we'll have, where we'll have our own DNS, our own web server, and we'll see how it works in practical situation. Any questions?
No? Here you mentioned elastic IP. What it mean by?
So elastic IP. So again, it's one of the services in AWS. When you provision your own Linux instance, you get an IP address, which is a public IP, but when you restart, that public IP goes away and you get a new IP, right? So for testing, for learning and all that, it is fine, but when you actually provision your production instances, right, you cannot afford to have different IP addresses, right? And that is a service provided by AWS where you can have a permanent IP. Again, it will cost you, but I'll talk about that as well.
Okay, I got you. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, if there are no questions, we'll move on to the next one. Okay, now on the automation, so we'll have these things covered. So we'll start with Git, GitHub, and Jenkins. These are the build and release engineering tools. And then we'll talk about shell scripting. Again, this is must-to-have skills for any DevOps engineer. For shell scripting, using shell scripting, you can actually automate a lot of stuff. So we'll focus on that. Then we'll talk about infrastructure configuration. So Puppet, Chef, and Ansible. These are the tools very popular, very useful in today's world that we will be using for the infrastructure configuration. Okay, so all these tools, 3 tools, provide very similar capability where you can automate your infrastructure configuration. And if you have really large footprint, multiple servers installed, you can automate the infrastructure configuration in such a way that you don't need to worry about what is the configuration on which server and all that. It is centrally managed. And especially if you have large footprint, manage it, the configuration becomes really challenging. I've seen that practically. So when you move on to or start using some of these tools, it becomes much easier, and not just easy, but even the consistency. So if you have, say, 5,000 web servers, right? On few servers, you have one type of configuration, on few another type of configuration. It's a big problem, right? So you need to have consistency across the servers, and that is what you can achieve by having some of these tools like Puppet, Chef, or Ansible. Okay.
Okay.
Moving on to next one. So package installations and updates. So we'll be doing, by the way, a lot of package installations. All these tools that we're talking about, these are nothing but the packages. So RPM is one, which is Red Hat Package Manager. And Yum is another one, which is, again, if you use Yum, it becomes much easier for you to install any package and all. Again, we'll see how we can have our own Yum depots and different type of repository for Yum. So we'll, spend some time on that. Also, we'll have source-based installation. So you might have heard about open source, right? Open source means you have the source code available, and you can modify as per your requirement, compile it, and start using it. So we'll do a couple of tools installation using source-based, right? Let me know if you have any questions. Otherwise, I'll move on to the next one.
No, that's okay.
Okay. Okay. So this is, as said, the last slide on the topics. But I'm open to, if you have any questions, anything that you want me to include, I'll be more than happy to do that. But let me quickly walk you through this one. So monitoring and alerting, we will be using Nagios as the tool. Again, very popular. A lot of people are using it, and very powerful, by the way. This is, by the way, again, open source. So, by the way, any of these tools that we are learning, none of these tools is going to cost us. It's all going to be open source and all that. Then performance tuning and troubleshooting skills. This is, again, must-to-have skills for any successful DevOps engineer, because if you run into a problem, the first thing that you do is to troubleshoot the problem and fix it. That's the kind of expectation. So we will understand, like, if there is a problem, or more like, use case that if, imagine this is the problem, how would you troubleshoot? How would you step by step understand what the problem is and detect the problem first, and then provide a solution, kind of fixing the problem. Also, performance tuning. This is about how do you get maximum performance out of whatever you have, right? So we'll talk about that as well. Finally, we'll talk about task scheduling using cron job. This is a scheduler tool. Using that, you can schedule any task. So suppose you want to take a system backup at, say, Friday 3 a.m., right? You can schedule it to your, using cron job. You can write a script and put it into the cron job. The cron job will get executed at 3 a.m. on Friday. And as I said, that was my last slide. Couple of maybe FAQs. Duration is going to be 4 to 5 weeks. We'll have the session Monday to Friday, 1 hour each day. Then, the training videos will be shared on a daily basis. I generally upload it on my Google Drive, and I give you the access, so you will have videos, recorded videos available on a daily basis. One more thing which I have not mentioned it here is that during the training session, as I mentioned, it's going to be a lot of interaction. So I pass the control to you, so you become the presenter. And probably this is the only slide I'm going to share, or I'll not have any slide deck later. But during the session, you will notice that I pass the control to you, so you become the presenter, and then I guide you, of course, over GoToMeeting on the steps. So that way, it is more of a hands-on. You will notice that it's a lot of hands-on, a lot of lab exercises that we'll be doing it. The main intention is, if you do hands-on, you learn faster. Instead of me doing it and you watching it, we'll just reverse the role. So you'll be doing it, and of course, I'll be guiding you. So that is what I wanted to mention. Any questions?
So, like you are talking about performance tools, and also, can you tell me which tools mainly we are focusing on the performance and these?
Yeah. So for me, the tools, you can learn any of the tools, and there are a number of tools available. My focus will be how do you first find out what the problem is. Detection is the first one, and secondly, how do you approach? How do you approach, say, for example, on performance? How do you approach, in improving the performance of the system.
Okay. So here is one question. Like currently I'm working on the Microsoft technologies. Okay. So when I'm moving to the like in Linux, and DevOps is currently like producing a lot of jobs. I have seen
Right.
number of.
Right.
Okay. So how beneficial it is to me?
So from Microsoft to Linux, you mean, or in general DevOps?
No, I'm moving from Microsoft to Linux or DevOps.
Okay.
If I include this in my CV, then how benefits is to me?
Yeah. So just to let you know, I mean, world is moving towards Linux, or it has already moved. You can do the Google and can find out the percentage. I think you'll be able to find it out. Majority of the organizations, including Microsoft, by the way, they have set up on Linux. I mean, I'm not saying Microsoft everything they have it on Linux, but Microsoft has good number of footprint on their Linux environment, on the Linux environment. So Linux is, I would say, the OS which is being used. Lot of companies have moved towards Linux, and they have seen the benefits and all that. So that way, I mean, the share of Microsoft on the server side is much lower than Linux, I would say. Okay. And I can talk about few things. I mean, I've been working on Linux for the last many years. Linux, first of all, I mean, it is very reliable compared to Microsoft if you're comparing, and then the fast, all of that. I mean, there are a lot of benefits. Why, you know, and probably that's the reason why a lot of these companies are running on Linux. You name any of the, you know, successful companies. Yahoo, for example, everything is on Linux. Facebook, yes, everything is on Linux. LinkedIn, everything is on Linux. Apple, on Linux. So most of the companies, you know, they run their infrastructure on Linux, or the services on their Linux.
So here is one question. Like there are already a number of tools, like for the configuration and all that things. So why we need the DevOps particularly?
DevOps is, as I said, DevOps is not a technology. DevOps is a mindset. And the reason why I mentioned about mindset is, if you are a typical IT company, you do not have DevOps mindset. Here is how you operate today. You have a dev team, yes, and that particular dev team is responsible for developing an application. You have a testing team responsible for testing and finding a problem or bug. And then you have an IT or operations team responsible for managing the application in production. That's the typical setup. Now, and if you have this kind of setup, as an operations, do you have visibility into how application is being developed? You do not, right? Because it's very transactional, very siloed that, you know, I'm a dev, my focus is only to develop an application. I don't care whether I have a lot of memory leaks or how much resource consumption I'm doing and all that. Beyond, you know, that is maybe operations team responsibility, right? That is what the mindset is, if you are into that kind of mode. But today's situation, like Facebook, for example, you know how many times they release the product today?
Yeah, very frequently.
Very frequently, 12 to 15 times in a day, they have the release going on. Now, if you have this kind of setup where dev has no visibility into how my application is going to behave in production, what if they release something and there are a lot of memory leaks? It will bring the site down, right? Because you haven't done any analysis, you have no idea how this application is going to work in production and all that. So now, to move into, or to match the requirement, you need to have this DevOps mindset where dev and ops, they work together. And you cannot, as a developer, you cannot think that I just write my code and someone else will find the bug. No, you have to change that. You have to write your test cases. You might have heard something like test-driven development, where
yes,
development that you do, it has to be test-driven. Yes, I mean, we already know. And similarly for operations, as an operations, you just cannot now say that, you know, I just know about Linux system admin and my job is done. No, you cannot. You need to understand the application side. Of course, you don't need to write the application code, but you need to understand how application is working. So if something got deployed or released today, right, and if you're seeing some problem, what is the solution that you have? Can you go and roll back? Maybe that is one, but is that a solution? No, right? We are talking about 15 releases in a day. So per hour, it is more than 2 for sure, or close to 2. Now, if you release one, when will you release the next one? When will you fix the problem? Then you'll have huge backlog, right?
Yeah.
So, as a dev, as an operations, you need to understand how application is being developed. You need to ensure that it is properly tested and all that. You need to create a pipeline that how do I automatically run in pre-production environment and get a confidence that I'm releasing this product and I'm sure that it will work. If it doesn't work, I know what needs to be done. It's not that I need to run to developer and then say, hey, this is the problem, you just go ahead and fix it. So that kind of mindset is called DevOps basically. So today, I mean, ideal DevOps situation, suppose you are building an application like Facebook. Mm-hmm. So you have a requirement where dev, testing team and operations team, they work together, and then they decide what will be the infrastructure, what will be the architecture of the setup, right? Because we are talking about Facebook, right? So you decide on that, and then you collectively work on it. So everyone will go into their own mode where you develop the application, you have your build pipeline created, you have testing automated, all of that. But then you work as a team. As a team you work, but then you have kind of responsibility defined for each member of the team and all that, rather than having 3 distinct teams. So that's what is called DevOps mindset. I know I've given you a kind of lengthy answers to your short question.
No, actually I got your perspective. No, I got. Okay.
Any other questions, guys? Prashant, Senu?
No.
Okay, so now about the timing. So I think Anil, you said you are in India, right? How about right. Prashant and Venu?
I'm in California.
Okay. No, I didn't hear that well. Venu, where are you located?
California.
California. How about you, Prashant?
I'm in California.
Both of you are in California?
Yeah.
Okay. So I was wondering if there is a possibility we can meet in the evenings. An evening could be, and California is specific. How about maybe 7 p.m., 7:30 p.m.